Oh, there's so much wrong with this lighting. Please tell me I can fix it in editing. So the RG405M from Emulation was released about a month ago, but I wasn't able to use mine until just last week because mine came with a broken screen. If you watched my unboxing video, you know what that's about. If you didn't, you should probably go watch it. After this one, I want the watch time. That was resolved last week, like I said, and I've been using this ever since. And let me tell you, it's actually surprised me in how much I like it. So this thing retails for $178 if you buy it straight through Emulation, and I've been talking about how outrageous I think that price is ever since it was first announced. And while I still have my complaints, it's not my biggest issue with the device. But let's circle back to the price after I've talked about my complaints and other things about this device that I do enjoy. So this thing uses the same T618 chipset that basically every other cheap handheld device has been using for the past 1 or 2 years, including Emulation's other devices. The Mali G52 GPU, 4GB of RAM, and 128GB of storage are common for these types of handhelds. And we'll get to this in a bit when I talk about my complaints, but I am kind of sick of this chipset. The specs so far are the exact same as the specs in the RG505, which Emulation released late last year. What differentiates them though is the material used to create them and the size, obviously. Because if you look at them compared to each other, sorry, I'm holding my mic with one hand so I can't really show you, but they're obviously different sizes. We'll discuss it more in a second when I talk about the hardware of the device, but this thing is made using an aluminum shell, which is very obvious just looking at it. Emulation doesn't list specifically what the RG505 was made of. I assume it's just some kind of plastic, but it's very obvious that this was not made using aluminum. You know what? Let's just move on to the hardware now because I have a lot to say about it. So let's get the obvious out of the way. It's made of aluminum. That actually makes it feel way higher quality than you'd expect, and it feels super solid because of it. I actually really do like the material because it feels, like I said, super solid, and I really like holding it just because it feels super premium. Which, I mean, it kind of is at the price that it's at. The face buttons actually feel really nice and have a good amount of travel between them, so they're nice to use. The joysticks are similar in that they feel really nice and are comfortable, but they're Hall sensing like the ones on the RG505, so they will never get drift. I'm not sure you'd play a device like this enough to have it get drift if it wasn't Hall sensing, but I mean, rather safe than sorry. The D-pad actually feels really great. I know I've complained about the D-pad on their past devices, namely the RG35XX and the RG505, but this one feels really nice. I haven't experienced misinputs, and the material it's made out of, which I assume is just some sort of plastic material, feels really nice to rest my fingers on when I'm using it. I feel like I'd prefer a D-pad that uses buttons underneath instead of a rubber membrane, but this D-pad feels so good, I really don't care. Like, I'm gonna compare this to the D-pad on the RG505, and I can already tell that it feels much better. And it's probably just because of the material used to make the D-pad, but something about this plastic here compared to, this is why you don't film while holding your microphone, but comparatively, the D-pad on this just generally looks nicer. D-pad on here just generally looks nicer, and it's like more rounded, it doesn't feel as sharp, and it feels better with its travel distance. So there's a lot about it that's just better than the RG505. The shoulder buttons aren't as big or long as I'd want them to be, just because when I'm using the device, my fingers are already like crunched over like this to hit the shoulder buttons, and they're resting on the Z, L, and ZR buttons. So when I have to use L and R, they'll go like this, which is not the most comfortable thing in the world, but I mean, it's still playable. I prefer them to be a bit longer just because I don't want to have to move my hand like this every time I want to use a shoulder button, but it's not a huge deal. The most obvious thing someone will point out is the placement of the D-pad. It's on the bottom left side, which is confusing, especially for a device like this because of how powerful it is. We'll get to that later, but it is a little confusing, this D-pad placement. Putting it on the bottom left certainly is a unique choice considering how small this device is, how it's barely able to play games that utilize the joysticks, and how its larger counterpart that I keep bringing up, the RG505, had the joysticks on the bottom. What's up with that? I feel like the placement should have been switched just because this layout would have made more sense, like if the D-pad was up here. But I also don't hate this layout. I've come to like it. The only thing about it that I'd say is genuinely uncomfortable is left on the D-pad, which I don't really use all that often in games, so it's not really a big issue. But when I'm playing the device, my fingers are kind of scrunched over, my thumb kind of scrunches over just to try to hit it, and it does get pretty uncomfortable. And my thumb, like, if I'm holding it like this, my thumb actually pushes into my hand, and after playing for a little bit, it gets uncomfortable. So I don't like that, but it's not the end of the world. Reaching down for the D-pad isn't uncomfortable, and the joysticks just feel good, so it doesn't really matter. It's just the D-pad that I was concerned about. I wasn't really caring about the joysticks. As long as they are like good enough, then they're good, because this isn't really a 3D centric device, even though that's kind of what I've been using it for. The device overall feels really nice and actually sounds really good. I know I don't usually talk about the audio on these devices just because when I'm playing these devices, I'm usually playing them in public settings, like the bus or in school, so I don't really use the volume that much, but actually using it with volume, it sounds really good. The screen, aside from some issues I've had, is actually good. It's not high quality or anything, but on a device like this, it makes sense to have a screen like that. It's a 4x3 screen. What were you really expecting? Okay. Moving on to software, this is pretty much the same as the RG405, which if you haven't seen that device's OS, is pretty simplistic and bare bones. It came with this weird pre-installed background that I'm pretty sure came on the RG505 installed as well, and I haven't changed it yet. I'm not really sure why. You know what? I changed it. That's better. It just genuinely looks better now. I don't really like live wallpapers. They're kind of cool, but like, it takes a battery. I'm like, why? Why would you want that? It's pretty basic considering it's just Android 12, but I wish they put work into their launcher and actually had an option to use it on this device, just like Retroid does. I can't find any way to use their launcher on this device because there isn't a button to open it like there was on the RG505. The RG505 had a button on the side that was kind of like a home button. It's that circle button. I doubt you're gonna be able to see it. There was a circle button on the side that would take you to the launcher and then take you home if you pressed it again. This device has a home button, but it just brings you home. It's a back and home button. If there is a way to launch it, it's not apparent to the user because I have not been able to find it. The software is pretty bare bones though. It's not anything to write home about, but it is functional, which is pretty much all you can ask for on these devices. If you have a functional OS and it works well, it works. That's what you get. I wish they would have like suggested app installs like Retroid does on their devices, because having something like Dolphin for handheld pre-installed would be very nice to have, just because they do have pre-installed apps like Dolphin MMJR and like Aether-SX2, Mupen 64 plus FZ. These are all great, but there are some apps I just wish they would like utilize more or like optimize better for their devices like Retroid does. And I don't want to stick to a random app that Retroid made to get games running better on here. It would make the setup process a lot easier, but like, it's whatever. But I mean, if we're going to talk about emulation, I feel like I'm becoming a broken record when it comes to emulation on these devices, just because of how often I talk about this chipset and how kind of low powered I think it is. But I mean, am I ever wrong? I do want to talk about emulation though, because it's what this channel is about, and I wouldn't be reviewing this device if it wasn't for emulation, so I do want to give you guys that. So this thing is just barely powerful enough to emulate GameCube games, and if you are planning on emulating GameCube games, I would recommend finding Dolphin for handheld from Retroid and downloading it onto your device and using it, because for as much as I love Dolphin MMJR, which they pre-installed, is it MMJR or is it MMJR2? It's MMJR2. Okay, MMJR2. But for as much as I love MMJR2, some games just run better on Dolphin for handheld, and also a lot of games run better at a lower resolution, which Dolphin for handheld lets you play. They let you, the emulator, like I've said before in other videos, has options for you to be able to play at lower resolutions than 1x. Citra is actually pretty fun to use because this screen is pretty much the perfect resolution for the bottom screen of a 3DS. Sadly, not a lot of games really utilize the bottom screen in ways where you can like play the whole game on the bottom screen, and also not a lot of 3DS games run well on here. It is cool to finally use the single screen option for the emulator and not be annoyed by it because of how well the bottom screen works on here, but like I said, sadly, like GameCube games, not all 3DS games run well. This device is great for 2D powered gaming though, and some early 3D gaming, so I'm sure Dreamcast, PS1, N64, all of those run great. You just need the required emulators, and anything below that will run well. DS runs well, a lot of stuff really does run well, but it's when you get to those higher end systems, even from older generations like the GameCube, PS2, that might not run the best. Quickly talking about the issues I had with this device. What was up with my screen? So if you didn't watch my unboxing video, you wouldn't know that they sent me a device with a broken screen, which delayed this video and that video by about a month. Do you want to know why I didn't upload for a few weeks? Because of this. Do you want to know why my Retroid Pocket Flip is literally sitting on my desk right now in a box because I haven't opened it yet? Because of this. I waited, and the screen for this came first, so I fixed it and then did my impressions. And I can't do an impressions video for another device before I do the review. So I have to do this review first, which is so frustrating because now it's cutting into my time. But I don't want to rant, so let's get out of this. Another smaller thing that I've come to expect from Emulation devices by now is that there's no HDMI out in any form. I've come to expect this, like I said, but it's kind of funny how the Emulation RG405XX has a mini HDMI out port on the top, but this device doesn't have anything like that, and neither did the RG505. Like, these are more expensive, more powerful devices, yet they don't have HDMI out in any form. Another issue that's not really an issue is the internals. I've mentioned it before, but we're going to go over it now. I am sick and tired of dealing with these T618 chipsets in these devices, and I'm about to have to do that again for the Retroid Pocket Flip, which is literally sitting on my desk right now in its box, because I have to film this video before I film the impressions video for that. I'm just tired of all of these devices coming out with basically the same internals, and the only thing differentiating them is the design. I want a new chipset. I want something more powerful, because this thing, I can name 5 devices right now that use this chipset. You want me to try? Powkitty X18S, Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, Retroid Pocket Flip, Emulation RG505, Emulation RG405M. There's probably more than that. There's probably a ton more than that. But these are the ones I'm mentioning. It's so frustrating just because I like seeing innovation. I like seeing these companies make new things. But it's like, you're releasing the same device, basically, just with a different design. And it's not even like this is like a cheaper alternative, like one you can buy for less money, because the RG505 is less than this. This is $180 around then, and it's smaller and the same amount of power. I don't get it. It's really frustrating, not gonna lie, but I'm still gonna review the devices, so it's not like I really have any choice. All right, let's bring this full circle. Why is it so expensive? I just went over this. I just yelled about this. But I love pretty much everything about this device, except for the price. The only real purpose I can find is the material it's made out of. The aluminum really does make it feel solid, and it just makes it feel like a high quality device, but I do think $180 is still too much. I would honestly recommend the RG505 to people who are looking for a portable emulator instead of this device, just because of how cheap it is compared to this, unless you want a smaller and more solid feeling device. But the RG505 doesn't even feel that bad. The shell on this is just better. That's the only thing that I think is better about this, and it's smaller. So if you want to fit it like in your pocket or something, you can. But I mean, if you're a man, you have man's pockets, you have men's pockets. The RG505 can fit in there too. Like, I fit it in like all of my pockets, so you have nothing to worry about. So I really like this device. I feel like there definitely is an audience for it, but I don't really see anybody outside of that niche audience buying it. Like, I mean, nobody really buys these things outside of the people who like portable emulators anyway, but still, I don't see anyone, like, if there were people who were, I don't think this is the one they'd buy, just because it's more expensive. I feel like it might be too expensive for anyone outside of that target audience, and I doubt it'll get any activity from the casual buyer. But what do you guys think? Am I wrong about this thing? Is there something that I left out that you want me to talk about? Is there something I said that's incorrect? Which I doubt, because I did my research. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in a few days for my unboxing and impressions video of the Retroid Pocket Flip, which I'm probably going to film right after I finish filming this, because I really want to open that box. Goodbye. Woo!